Hey there. Welcome to Millennium.Milestone presents a site dedicated to storytelling in books, movies, video games, and other exciting genres where I've come up with a new Greek tragedy for the modern audience.
Telemachus,
Penelope,
Antinous,
Odysseus,
Athena,
Telemachus,
Calypso, Penelope,
Menelaus,
and Helen of Troy.
Odyssey,
After the Iliad,
hidden no horse,
won the war.
Yeah, I'm serious.
Odyssey,
Itching for Ithaca.
Get past the Peloponnesian Peninsula,
Odyssey,
Mediterranean,
psych out a cyclops,
and crater his cranium.
Circe is
cursing the
Men into bacon bits.
Gotta go on the road.
Head to where Hades is.
Odysseus,
Athena,
Telemachus,
Calypso, Penelope,
Menelaus,
and Helen of
We
Troy.
could be Homer. The way we go over.
The story in 6 feet.
So here we are at long last, The Odyssey by Christopher Nolan, and boy has the online backlash ever been at a frenzy for months on end. And it hasn't gotten better by certain actors saying stuff they really should have not said. Sure hasn't helped by Christopher Nolan himself, who has either been quiet or dismissive about what people have said. But nonetheless, The Odyssey is here, and we're here to find out whether this was truly a masterpiece or a monstrosity. So let's find out right now. Now, before I begin, I do want to get something out of the way that might be a little important to consider while I'm judging this very film from Christopher Nolan. I am not claiming to be some scholar that went to Cambridge and studied every aspect of the Iliad and all of Homer's poems and all that. I remember the stories when I was in elementary school and some movies that pertain to it, and I remember a good number of details now that I've did a little bit of research on this. So if I forget something, show me a little slack. It doesn't mean you can't correct me. I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm here to learn just as much as you are. But I wanted to get that out of the way first and foremost. This is a site dedicated to storytelling, and I really want to dive into this particular story because it does interest me, the Odyssey itself, because it is a classical Greek story that is basically the template for storytelling, if you will. And there's plenty of things I know I can learn from Homer, just like anybody else when it comes to storytelling in this. So let's get that out of the way. And then the next thing I want to mention very importantly is Christopher Nolan himself. I am a fan of a lot of Christopher Nolan films. We can go back as far as the Dark Knight trilogy. We can go back as far as also Inception or The Prestige. All those movies are fantastic films that I definitely enjoyed watching Christopher. And I'm sorry, I also forgot Interstellar, another great Christopher Nolan film. I do have my nitpicks here and there, just like any fan with those films, but for the most part, they're good films. But now, about the Odyssey itself. I cannot sit here and pretend that I don't notice that Nolan took some liberties with this. I cannot pretend also that there are not certain details, or I should also say nuances, that shouldn't be addressed while talking about this movie in particular. And we're going to get into that right now. Christopher Nolan's adaptation of The Odyssey follows the legendary king Odysseus, played by Matt Damon, as he embarks on a perilous journey back to his home island of Ithaca after the Trojan War. While he faces various mythological challenges, his wife Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway, and their son Telemachus, played by Tom Holland, struggle back home against greedy suitors vying for their wealth and position. In the second half of the story delves deeply into Odysseus' eternal struggles and the brutal reality of war, often told in a non-chronological way. As he finally gets closer to Ithaca, he faces perilous challenges while his son Telemachus embarks on his own quest to find him, culminating in a tense return and confrontation with the suitors back at his ancestral home. Like any Christopher Nolan film, they're going to be grounded in reality, and he also has a very great knack of being able to utilize cinematography that really immerses you in a different perspective of what you're watching half the time. Now, that being said, I mentioned my positive things I love about Nolan. Here's where, unfortunately, the things I don't love about Nolan come into play here a little bit. And it starts with, the opening of the film. As mentioned before, Nolan likes to do non-chronological type storytelling where he goes back and forth from one story to the next, so you're kind of having to piece things together as you go. That's already a struggle in itself. But what doesn't help along his journey in doing this is that you're struggling to listen to dialogue that's done in plain English, which I get that would be helpful too, which already kind of takes you out of the film a little bit because you kind of want to feel like you're immersed in an ancient world and not in today's world. I don't care for that. The other problem I have is, while I do love Nolan's sound effects in the films when he gets those loud waves, those loud sounds that you get in any Nolan film, for some very weird reason, you have to really, really listen to the whispering voices of every character in this film. And what doesn't help, and again, this is probably an artistic choice from Nolan, but I'm not loving it, is that a lot of the actors in this are speaking in monotone, low-level voices that you're not catching on everything of the story. And in a theater, that could be a bit of a problem. Even if you watch this at home, you could probably struggle a little bit. At least, you pull the volume up and all that, surround sound. I don't know, but you can find out when it gets on DVD or streaming. But in a theater setting, you want to hear these people. You want to hear the dialogue, and that really bothered me for quite a bit. So I had to really, really, really listen to the film, and even then I struggled. And because of that, I had to find other means of rewatching this, which I'm not going to mention how, but I did rewatch it again because, again, I struggled to try and catch the dialogue in this. But that's the minorest of issues compared to what else I have to talk about with this film.
And I loved seeing Elliot Page from the First Faces. You see, what was it like reuniting with him years after doing Inception together?
It was really fun. Elliot's just terrific, and I just thought this was such a great part of it.
The next thing that comes to mind that I feel like I have to even address is the characters that Nolan chooses to highlight in the Odyssey here. And, brace yourselves. Obviously, I'm going to have to talk about somebody in particular that clearly this was done as some sort of a virtue signal. And that's Sinon. Sinon, for many who already know this for the news, is not a character that's in the written works of Homer in the Odyssey specifically. In a poem, yes. In other parts of Homer's works, Sinon exists, but not in the Odyssey at all. But guess what? Sinon is in this role, and at first you thought Elliot Page, who plays this character, was only going to be a minor role in this. Come to realize, no, it's not as minor as you thought it was. Now, what I mean is, Sinon takes on a role that was meant for someone very, very familiar. Yes, you guessed it, the one, the only, Achilles, played one time by a very famous actor known as Brad Pitt in Troy, is nowhere to be found in this movie at all. Can you believe it? Yep. Instead of getting Achilles showing up in the Hades scene where Odysseus is supposed to meet up and get some answers as to how to get home, he gets Sinon instead. Son of a bitch! Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know exactly how much of a role Achilles played in the Odyssey 100% from the original written works, but I would imagine showing up in Hades to help Odysseus make it home might be a kind of a pivotal role he played in this. And come on, don't sit here and tell me that Nolan did this for some sort of artistic choice here.
Critics are not going to they're not going to contradict Nolan for the most part. Some have in the past, but for the most part, no. But more importantly, because this has become a culture war football, the critics are going to back it just for that. And they have a track record of doing that all the fucking time.
A lot of people don't realize it's not about who gave the best performance.
No.
It's about
oh God, no.
who they, meaning the Academy voters, want to see give a speech. They want to see that moment. How will that person react?
I wish I could articulate that much better than Gary and Chris did, but I felt like this is the best footage to really get this point across. Again, this is not a virtue signal, and believe me, it doesn't even end there. There's another person we need to even address.
Oh man! Oh God! Oh man! Oh God! Oh man! Oh God! Oh man!
Look at me. I'm Helen of Troy now.
You hear that, ladies? She's the Helen of Troy now. More like hell of fucking ugly.
All right, jokes aside, I mean, I was just playing around there a little bit, so don't take my words so incredibly seriously if you have sensitive feelings about that. Helen of Troy, let's talk about that because that really needs to be addressed here. I'm sorry. Let's start with Lupita Nyong'o herself. Wonderful actress, talented in every way possible. I'm not going to take any of that away from her. Let me get that out of the way very quick and straight. But there is no way on any Earth, on any universe, that 1,000, let alone 1,000,000, or even 1,000,000,000 ships would fight over her. This is ridiculous. And I'm sorry. Again, she gives a nicer performance. She does everything she's supposed to do, even though she's not even that pivotal in the story to begin with. Helen of Troy, in this version, completely immerses me because this is the part that I don't think people seem to understand. Helen is kind of a tragic character thrust in a situation she can't get out of. Doesn't that context already bother you a little bit when you put someone with a different skin color in that context? How are you not inferring slavery in that story, despite what you're trying to prove with this here? And again, this is another example of the brownie points that the Screen Directors Guild is trying to prove.
I'd be like, so Homer, how do you feel about the screen time given to these women, considering how little you spent with them? Okay.
And then do you lean forward and look at him like that?
Yes, like, remember us?
Now, I honestly don't care if Lupita knows what she was just saying there and what kind of a backlash I was going to receive. That doesn't matter to me at this point because, quite frankly, Nolan had already done himself in long before even this narrative came about. However, this does signal the attitude that Hollywood has when it comes to storytelling, in that they don't care to listen to their audience in any capacity. If something's going to win them those accolades, those awards, those brownie points, you better believe they're going to shoot for the stars with this. They tried this with Cynthia Erivo. They tried this with Rachel Zegler, and they're sure going to try it again even here and onward and beyond.
This is not okay. This needs to stop now. This is cancer. This is so much cancer that I can feel the tumors growing on my back.
Now, my criticisms don't just stop with the actresses. I do want to also acknowledge that Matt Damon isn't necessarily the most perfect choice for Homer. Odysseus. And don't get me wrong, I think Matt Damon has good performances. The ones I think stand out for me, with him, I would say would be Good Will Hunting. And even though you got Robin Williams in there definitely carrying him a little bit in that film, you also have him in doing a pretty good role in The Martian. But if you look at Matt Damon's performances, at least from my perspective, they're kind of roughly the same if you think about it. And I do feel like you're just getting Matt Damon cosplaying as Odysseus. Up next is Tom Holland, and don't get me wrong, I don't mind him as Spider-Man in the films that we got currently. But aside from Uncharted and another film, I can't think of the name off the top of my head. I cannot think of a single film where he stands out incredibly different from a previous film. Much like Matt Damon, they're essentially playing the same person or the same persona. They're not giving a performance. And, even with Matt and even with Tom, I think the problem lies not just with them, but with also Nolan making these characters speak in low tone, near whispers to force the audience to pay attention. I'm not a fan of it. Once again, I think you do need robust, charismatic characters in between. You could have had that with Berthenthal, who plays Menelaus. But even with Berthenthal, he's speaking in a very weird, low-tone voice, along with the modern language. And again, a lot of all this breaks the immersion of feeling like you're in a Greek world. Again, not a fan of this. This doesn't really immerse me in this movie in any given way. The one standout I will definitely highlight in this movie is Robert Pattinson as Antinous. He plays a true and true snarky villain that you really want to see his comeuppance in this. He's gone from being a heartthrob to a definitive method actor. And the best thing about Robert Pattinson, which is interesting, is he doesn't come with that much controversy as opposed to other actors and actresses who've opened their big mouth and said something they probably shouldn't have in the first place. Now, lastly, I do need to address the issue that I think has been a recurring theme with many modern day adaptations of anything from a superhero to mythological heroes. It's Odysseus himself. Now, again, Homer doesn't sit here and try to tell you that Odysseus is some grand hero with no flaws or no issues of his own. You know, obviously Odysseus made decisions that costed the lives of his men that went on the journey back home to Ithaca. That being said, in this particular version of the Odyssey, it doesn't seem like they're balancing that with the part that really should be emphasized here, and that's that Odysseus is trying to do things from a heroic scale. He is trying to do things that is the right thing. Here, there is a lot more diminishing of his character, his status, and questioning whether he even is a good person at all. And again, I get with Nolan, he would love to throw conversation, nuance, and controversy where possible in a film. He is an artistic filmmaker. I'm not going to ignore that reality with him. But this particular version of the Odyssey is a epic mythological fantasy also at the same time. On one hand, you do want some element of the Lord of the Rings in this. There is room to do grounded storytelling in this, and I can see that. But this doesn't feel like it got to that point there. Now, as of this recording, I am going to also acknowledge other factors that need to be in play here. Despite everything I said about my criticism, and this is just my opinion, again, you can take it with a grain of salt, you can take it as however you wish to take it. You don't need to take it as gospel here. But I was never of the opinion that the Odyssey was going to fail in any capacity, despite all these things I criticized about. Nolan has a large fan base, so it's obvious that this film is going to have success. It did well during Oppenheimer, and Nolan has had quite a few hits along the way, so he has a track record of creating good films. He's had movies that didn't do well either. Let's acknowledge that also. Let's not ignore that he's had bad films. So going to the box office numbers, currently as of this Sunday that I'm doing this recording, he is on track to get to 100 million. I would venture to guess, and again, this is just a guess, I got nothing other than my two models I'm using here, and just to give you a little bit of insight where I'm getting my thoughts on, I'm using comparisons between Oppenheimer and Wicked. Oppenheimer because it's a Nolan film, and Wicked because of the controversy that came with that film, but still managed to garner money as well. So that's why I'm using those two comparisons. So I'm going to venture to say that this film is probably going to either catch up to Oppenheimer very soon, or it will surpass it and get closer to Wicked numbers. I don't know if that's going to be the case. Things could change. Maybe there is enough backlash out there that this could affect the film. We're just going to have to wait and see. But I'm going to venture to say that 900 million is going to be its full worldwide take, both internationally and globally. Let's see how that plays out. I could be totally wrong. And again, this is just a total guess on my part. That being said, unfortunately, that's where I kind of fall in a very difficult way of rating this film. For me, I would easily, without any of the controversy, any of the convoluted craziness that's thrown in here by Hollywood standards, I would have given this at least mid, maybe a little bit above it. But for me, I don't like this version of the Odyssey. I'm not a fan of it. It doesn't really entertain me. I will say the ending is probably the only thing that really got me invested. And it was the final moments when Odysseus finally got home and took his home back. That is part of the entire story. But everything else that led up to that was just filler story that really did not invest me. It didn't feel like you were in a grand scale story. You didn't feel like you were in ancient Greece. You felt like you were constantly being told, hey, from our viewpoint, this is how this really looks like.
Oh, yeah!
I don't want that. I want to be taken away into a world far, far away from where I am. And that's what the Odyssey is supposed to be, an adventure where you are taken away from reality for now. And in a strange way, that is what Odysseus is taken from reality. But we're living in a reality that's grounded in Hollywood standards that, unfortunately, I feel sad to say this, for me personally, this is a poor rating for me. Many people will disagree with me on this, and that's fine if you want to disagree. I welcome comments left and right, whatever you want to say about what I think of this film. But for me personally, this is a poor film in that regard. So those are, all in all, my final thoughts on the Odyssey. Again, you're welcome to comment what you think, if I'm right or wrong in that, or you think the movie's best, let me know. I'm aware that some of you may not have been interested in the last 2 videos I've made. Apologize for that. I'm trying my best here, but if you want to let me know what you'd prefer I do, you're welcome to comment that as well. I am trying to figure out my audience as I go. And on the same token, I do want to also mention, I'm sorry if you can't really see footage of the actual movie, The Odyssey. Unfortunately, Universal is not very kind to content creators, and they love to ding you for just about anything in between. So I had to take some shortcuts, so to speak, to show what I can reasonably show on here. But again, like, share, subscribe, and you best better believe I'll be back for the next one.